So what we have done is very painstakingly and very tediously extracted all the data from the PSA website into an Excel file for the first 11 sets. That's the raw data set that we're working from, and that is a very powerful data set, as I'll talk about in a second. It's the best that we have for collectors that want to do analysis about the market and the population data. Hey, what's going on, everybody? You got the Parkside merchant here back again with another market analysis video. The content you're going to see here today took a long time to put together, and I can guarantee you've never seen anything quite like this for the market for Yugioh. So please, if you enjoy this content, if you get any value from this video, drop a comment, like, subscribe, all that good stuff to help support the channel. So without further ado, I think I'm going to get right down to business here. This is going to be a long video, but I think for folks that appreciate detail, who appreciate specificity, and who really enjoy getting into the real nitty-gritty here in the market are going to find a lot of value from this video. So let's go ahead and dive in. I'm going to go into present mode here and start sharing a couple of slides that I've put together based on some analysis that I've done of the PSA population report. And again, I will say that this is very original analysis that you're going to see here. I have not seen anything like this done at all for something like Yugioh. I've looked around. I think there's people in the baseball community that do analysis like this for some of the sports cards, but I have not seen anything public. YouTube, maybe people do this like on their own time. They keep these databases and things, you know, in their private records or whatever to help guide their investments or decision making, but there's nothing quite like this on YouTube. So buckle up. This is going to be a pretty interesting ride here, and I think a lot of folks are going to find this stuff very valuable. So what we're looking at essentially is a presentation that's going to talk about some of the most difficult cards in Yugioh to grade a PSA 10, which in my opinion makes those cards probably pretty valuable, right? Or pretty coveted relative to stuff that's just, you know, you can pick up 10s all day long, right? Or it's easy to get. These are going to be cards that we're going to talk about today that are exceptionally, exceedingly difficult to grade PSA 10. And that's important, right? Because when you think about cards that are valuable, in the old days, right, it was the stuff that was secret rare or stuff that was the ultra rares or whatever. Things that were just really hard to pull were ultimately considered the most valuable. In today's market, I think what's happened is we've got this PSA impact where stuff that's graded 10 or graded 9, right, it creates a new sort of a concept of scarcity in the marketplace. So while there are a lot of secrets, right, that are pretty rare in PSA 10, there's actually some stuff that's not secret, right? It's just super rares or other cards that are just really hard to get in PSA 10 for many number of different reasons that we'll get into. So maybe I'll start off by just talking about the population report. So if you're new to this whole Yugioh world, if you're new to this concept of graded cards, PSA, Beckett, you got some learning to do in order for this video to be valuable to you. But I recommend that if you're new to this, if you're just getting back into the hobby and you're learning about PSA, you're learning about Beckett, you should come back to this video and watch this content after you have an understanding about what PSA is, what they do, what the PSA pop report is, what slabs and all these different things mean, because this is the kind of insight that you need to see next after you have an elementary understanding of how the PSA and graded card market works. So, as many of you know, PSA has a population report that they publish, right? They make available the entire data set for how many cards have been submitted within a given category, as well as how those card grades break out across the entire spectrum, all the way from 1 to 5 to 10, with all the qualifiers. If there's stuff that's OC or there's stuff that's got some kind of a qualifier or other like half point or whatever. So what we have done is very painstakingly and very tediously extracted all the data from the PSA website into an Excel file for the first 11 sets. So This was a very time-consuming exercise. I could have done this for like a whole bunch of other stuff, promos for the tins, all these different things. I just figured, look, I'm going to stick to the basics. I'm going to do the first 11 sets that are considered kind of the OG, original, most kind of bread and butter sets from the series. So that's basically what this is. As I said, I didn't get too carried away with other sets in the data set that I pulled together here. I also did, I kept this only to super rares or higher. So basically 242 cards in total, right? If you follow the 2-10-10 rule, 2 secrets, it's 10 ultras and it's 10 supers. So 242 cards in total in this data set that I looked at, including only first edition pop values, including only the North American English releases. So there's no Asian English, no some of the European sets and all that other stuff not included here. And it's the total population. So for those of you that are asking, well, when you did total pop, did you include the stuff that was a qualifier grade or a half point grade or OC? The answer is yes. Wherever I say total pop, it's total. However many cards exist in that category, we've captured it. No unlimited here, right? Very careful to make sure it was just the first edition numbers that got counted. So that's the raw data set that we're working from. And that is a very powerful data set, as I'll talk about in a second. It is flawed, as many of you know, right? The PSA data set isn't perfect. There's a lot of problems with it, but it's the best that we have for collectors that want to do analysis about the market and the population data. So why does the PSA pop report matter, you may ask? So in my opinion, there's really two numbers that you can trust in the PSA population report. The first number is the total population, which is the complete volume of submissions, right? That number doesn't lie. That number is basically how many times have people submitted this card to PSA to try and get a grade out of it. Obviously, there's a lot of resubmits, people that get an 8 or a 9, and they just keep resubmitting it to try and get a 10. But that total number, that PSA total population number, doesn't lie, right? That's basically just the total volume of how many times that card has been submitted to PSA. So I think there is value in that figure. The other figure that I think is pretty valuable is the total PSA 10 population. So for the vast majority of people who score a PSA 10 on their card, they are probably not going to crack it out of the case and put it in a binder or crack it out of the case to go get it graded at Beckett or someplace else. So maybe there's 1 or 2 cards in each of the PSA 10 population pools that have been cracked and resubmitted maybe for some reason or sent off to Beckett or something, but I think it's very unlikely. Whatever the PSA 10 population says it is, you're probably pretty close to what it actually is. Whereas the PSA 9 population, PSA 8, those values don't mean much, right? Because a lot of people are constantly resubmitting stuff, cracking out 9s and 8s to try and get a higher grade. So what I've done basically in this presentation that you're going to see here is I've put together what I'm calling the rarity index score, which is basically the PSA 10 to total population ratio, which is to say what percent of the total submissions get a PSA 10 or have gotten a PSA 10. That figure in my mind is pretty important. As we'll talk about in today's content. I think it does indicate, to a degree, which cards are in high demand among collectors or other people out there in the market, like resellers, flippers, card stores. And I think it also indicates which cards are in low demand or are low priority areas in the market, areas that folks just don't care much about or have a lot of interest in grading. I think that this methodology that I'm going to share today can also indicate where the market is somewhat saturated. So where there's a lot of PSA 10s out there in the market, which may have an impact, right, on the kind of price that you would potentially be interested in paying for that card if you know that there are a ton of them available in the marketplace. So I wanted to share first off some big picture findings from the analysis that I did here. So across the 11 sets that you see here, 242 cards, right? That's 2 secrets, 10 ultras, 10 supers per set, 242 total. The grand total population of submissions, that's the total PSA pop for these 242 cards. It's over 20,000 cards, folks. I was shocked when I saw this grand total figure. I had to check my math multiple times. I wanted to make sure there was no error in my Excel model of some kind. There wasn't. I couldn't believe this. I was shocked, frankly. When I think of Yugioh, I think maybe there's a couple thousand PSA total population for many of the major ultras and supers and secrets. Interestingly, it's quite a big figure. 20,000 cards total population across all these 11 sets for the really rare cards. Of those 20,000 cards, just about 7,000 of them are graded PSA 10, which represents about 35% of the total Yugioh population for these 11 sets for the very rare cards are PSA 10, which is pretty interesting. On average, depending on the set, but on average, the population of PSA 10 is about 29 per card. So if you picked a random super or a random secret from one of these sets, odds are you're going to find the population's about 29 for the PSA 10s in general, right? That's just the average. This was kind of funny. There were only 3 cards out of these entire 11 sets that have over 70% of their population represented by PSA 10 grades. Those are Painful Choice, Legacy Hunter, and Tribute to the Doomed. I think what this means is, well, I don't know, I'll leave it up to you to interpret what it means, but in my opinion, it means that in general, people are just more selective with those sets. I know Ancient Sanctuary is not super popular, so that might be just in general a lower pop data pool there for those cards. So not a huge shocker there that those are pretty high, highly skewed towards the PSA 10 grade. The most submitted cards have pops over 400 cards, so 400 submissions. Those are the Dark Magician Girl and Blue Eyes White Dragon first edition LOB. No surprise there. Those are very popular cards. There are tons of resubmits that are happening in those categories. People that just literally, they have a 9 Blue Eyes White Dragon LOB and they just keep resubmitting and resubmitting and resubmitting until they get a 10 out of it, right? There's a lot of that going on in some of those categories that have like 350, 400 submissions. I don't believe this will be a surprise to most people, but Ancient Sanctuary, Invasion of Chaos, those each have several cards that have total populations less than 20 submissions. That's for secrets, supers, and ultras, folks. So very low pops generally in those sets. Not a huge surprise because those were some of the later sets and less popular. This card here, the Agent of Force Mars, first edition from Ancient Sanctuary, currently has the smallest total population among the 242 cards that we looked at in this distribution. So 15 submissions there. Must not be a very popular card relative to most of the other stuff in these sets. So moving on, I wanted to talk through some examples of the type of analysis that I'm going to show in today's presentation before we get into our dirty dozen, right? The hardest 12 cards to grade 10 in vintage Yu-Gi-Oh. So just as a baseline, I think we've got to talk about LOB first edition Blue Eyes White Dragon, right? Ultra rare, kind of the OG Holy Grail card of Yu-Gi-Oh. This has a total PSA population of about 400. I think there might have been a couple of qualifiers in there, like maybe one that was OC or one that had a half grade or something like that. There are 87 10s as of today, January 16, 2021, which represents about, it's about 22% of the total submission population is PSA 10, which is, that's pretty good, actually, when you start getting down to it. When we get into our dirty dozen, Blue Eyes White Dragon LOB first edition isn't even close. Okay, there's a stuff that's like way harder to grade 10 than this in today's market. And we'll get into that in a second. But just wanted to kind of level set everybody on the kind of the mainstay card here so that you had this in the back of your mind as kind of a basis of comparison for some of the stuff we're going to talk about in this presentation. This card, another infamous card in Yu-Gi-Oh! This is the left foot, right? The left leg of the Forbidden One, first edition, LOB. Notoriously difficult card to grade 10. Even this doesn't really come too close to our dirty dozen that we're going to talk about in today's presentation. About 18.9% of all the population out there for this card, grade 10, so it's 40 10s out of the 212 submissions. It is the most difficult of the Yugioh pieces to grade 10. It has the most exclusive rarity index score, if you will, of all these cards. So for what it's worth, it is a tough card to grade, but I wanted this one to be another one that people got to see as kind of a level set here before we get into the actual Dirty Dozen of Yugioh. For those of you that follow this channel, you know that I'm not a huge Pokemon expert or fan, but I did want to toss in here the 1999 first edition base set Charizard from Pokemon. As you can see here, this is a tough card to get a 10, but it does have a pretty big 10 population, right? There's 121 of these in 10 relative to, if you go back, right, only 40 of these exist in 10. Only 87 of the Blue Eyes White Dragon exist in 10. So by volume, you do have a lot more Charizards in 10. You have a lot more population. When you look at the distribution here for this card, literally, if you own this card, you have submitted it to PSA, or you've sold it to somebody who has submitted it to PSA. So you've got stuff that's like PSA 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all across the spectrum. There's like a lot of cards that grade very poorly, right, that skew this distribution, that make it look very difficult to get that 10 grade relative to the total pop. When you flip back to some of these Yu-Gi-Oh cards, on the other hand, you know, if people submitted every single copy of LOB first edition, it's going to start to look more and more like that Charizard, right? That number is going to drive down a ton. There's only 400 of these that have been submitted, because people that have the ones that have like been through the wash, right, that are just all destroyed, maybe they're not bothering to submit those just yet, like the PSA 1s and 2s and 3s. But eventually I do think that people are going to start submitting the LOB first edition Blue Eyes at the level of scale that's going to make it look more and more like this Charizard in terms of the distribution. Maybe not 2,000 of them, but there'll be more and more over the years that's going to make it a much smaller percentage that grade 10. Next up, just wanted to give you a quick look here at the Black Lotus. I don't know a ton about Magic either, but you could see from the distribution, this is an exceptionally difficult card to grade PSA 10, and it is extraordinarily rare. I mean, look at this. PSA 10 population, guys, is 7 cards, right? That is like, by an order of magnitude, folks, tinier than the Charizard, the left foot even, right? And the Blue Eyes White Dragon, right? The Holy Grail of Yu-Gi-Oh! So keep that in the back of your minds. There are some cards out there like the Black Lotus, and this next one here, you know, the Holy Grail of trading cards as an entire hobby, right? There are 3 PSA 10 1952 Topps Mickey Mantle cards in existence, folks. And you may know at the time of this video, like a week ago or a couple days ago, the PSA 9 edition of this card, where I think there's also single-digit volume, right? There's like seven of those or 8 of those or something like that, just sold for several $1 million, I believe, or it closed for like a really high amount of money. Keep this in the back of your minds as like a basis of comparison for what you're about to see in Yu-Gi-Oh's Dirty Dozen, okay? And I'm serious about this because part of why I think cards like this, the Mickey Mantle PSA 10 and 9, have such a high value is because they are so difficult to grade in PSA 10, right? If these were commodity, right, if everybody could get a 10 out of this card, it wouldn't be worth that level of dollars. Same would be true for the Black Lotus. If all 109 of that population were PSA 10, it would probably be worth less money. People would pay less for it because there'd be more of them available. There'd be more competition in the marketplace, right, for people that were interested in purchasing it. So, okay, enough on all this stuff. Let's get down to business on the actual Dirty Dozen of Yu-Gi-Oh, okay? What I'm about to talk through are the top 12 cards with the most exclusive rarity index score based on the PSA 10 population relative to the total PSA population, which would be the total volume of PSA submissions that exist at the time of this video, and this data was collected on January 16, 2021. So first up, we have a trap card here from LOD, last turn. This was the cover card, actually on the box. You could see it there in the little graphic, but that is the last turn card there on the cover of the Legacy of Darkness box. Ultra rare card, right? PSA 10 population of 9 cards out of the 53 that have been submitted, which gives this a rarity index score of 17% for this analysis. That's really hard, right? I mean, this is lower now than the left foot and some of the other stuff that we looked at earlier. This is a really hard card to grade in PSA 10, folks. You're going to see several cards in this distribution from the Legacy of Darkness set. That's not a surprise for a couple reasons. Number one, Legacy of Darkness is less popular than LOB, Metal Raiders, some of the really original like 2002 sets. And it's also notoriously off-center and has a lot of production issues. So it's very hard in general just to get PSA 10 grades out of LOD cards. There are people that open boxes on YouTube, and you can see this. They pull stuff out of those boxes that looks awful, right? Way off-center, just issues, right, with the production quality. So that makes some of these Legacy of Darkness cards exceedingly difficult to grade PSA 10. And among them is this nice trap card here, this ultra rare last turn, which is pretty iconic, right? You've got some Yamada Dragon elements there, and then some of the other cards. I think it's Hino Kagusuchi or something like that is this other guy here that's in this graphic. So cool card, and one of the most difficult to grade PSA 10 in the entire world of vintage Yu-Gi-Oh! Next up, number 11. Probably not a surprise here that this made the top 12, but the Dark Magician Girl, very popular card in Yu-Gi-Oh! This is a secret rare from the Magician's Force set. A couple reasons I think that drive the very low PSA 10 volume relative to the total pop. Number one, you have a lot of people resubmitting copies of this, so that total population probably a little inflated and a little bit skewed for people who just have a 9 or they have an 8, and they literally every 6 months or every 8 months, whenever they get the card back, they just crack it and they keep resubmitting it over and over and over again until they hopefully get a 10 out of it. And I think that's why the volume here, the 431, this is the second most submitted card in all of Yu-Gi-Oh! That's what's causing it, is the resubmissions, which in turn, right, skews that 68 figure for the PSA 10s and drives down its rarity index score. When in reality, there's 68 10s, folks. That's not the hardest thing to get in PSA 10. There's a lot of those out there. You can find this on eBay if you're looking for it. These come up every once in a while, right? They're expensive. People charge a lot of money for it, but there's 68 of them available. When you compare that to the Black Lotus, or you compare it to the left foot and some of the other things we looked at, not that hard to get in comparison. Okay, next up, you may ask, are there cards in Yu-Gi-Oh! That have a distribution of less than 15% of the total pop that are PSA 10? And the answer is yes. The majority of our Dirty Dozen fall into this category. So number 10, we have the infamous Nightmare Wheel card from Pharaonic Guardian. This is an ultra rare, iconic card from the television series. I know Merrick used this a couple times, I think, in the Battle City tournament. Just a fun card. And it's pretty iconic from the television series. Very low pop here. You can see PSA 10 volume is 7 cards. 7 cards, folks, out of the 47, which gives it about a 14.9% rarity index score here that we're calling it relative to some of the others. So this is a tough card to get in PSA 10. And the people that have those 7 PSA 10s, definitely not probably going to part with those things very easily. Because there's very few of them available in the market. Okay, number 9, we have the Chaos Command Magician. This is a Magician's Force card, another Magician's Force, ultra rare, population of 10 for the PSA 10 out of 68 submissions, which gives it another 14 some odd % rarity index score. What I should say is there's some commentators on YouTube. I think the Old School Experts talked about this in some of his videos, and others have mentioned it, but I believe Magician's Force is said to maybe have had a shorter print run than some of the other sets, some of like Metal Raiders and some of these others, which may account for some of the cards here that you're going to see that have just lower pops in general than some of these other very high pop categories. So there might actually be a smaller amount of these in the wild, just big picture, that are even available to submit, which could be driving down some of its rarity index scores for some of these cards. So bear that in mind. I don't know how true that is. It's anecdotal, but there might be some of these sets that actually have a smaller print run, right? There may be just less of them available in the market, which in turn results in less PSA 10s and less total pop in general. Okay, next up, number 8 here. This one's kind of funny. I don't know a lot about the Ancient Sanctuary set. This was pretty late. I was kind of out of Yu-Gi-Oh by the time that this one was popular. But this is a ultra rare from the Ancient Sanctuary set. There's only 4 PSA 10 copies of this card, folks, in the world. That's less than the Black Lotus, for reference. And it's almost as many, actually, as the Mickey Mantle 1952 Topps card, which is kind of funny. But I'm sure there's more of these out there. It's just a less popular card. Collectors are not very interested in Ancient Sanctuary. And just looking at this card, I'm looking at the effect of it. It says pay 800 life points. This card can attack your opponent's life points directly this turn. That's kind of a fun little gimmicky effect that maybe had been playable back in the day. I didn't play a ton of Yu-Gi-Oh by the time this card was printed, so I don't know for sure, but I'd reckon that this card might have been like a gimmicky, just sort of a funky little thing to have in your deck, sort of like a, I don't know, there's other cards like this, but it's got an effect that was kind of fun, it looks like, and kind of funky, and may have been useful and playable. So it's possible a lot of those got destroyed or played quite a bit, which makes the PSA 10 volume even harder to achieve. All right, next up, we've got another card here from Legacy of Darkness, Creature Swap. This one's a magic card, ultra rare, PSA 10 population of 5 out of 37 submissions, folks. That's a 13.5% rarity index score. This is a tough card, folks, to get in a PSA 10. You're looking for one of these, good luck finding it, right? I don't have much else to say about this. Legacy of Darkness, lots of centering issues, less popular set than Metal Raiders and LOB, less of a population, and less 10s. I think that's about it. Okay, next up we've got Diffusion Wave Motion. I don't know a ton about this card. It's a secret rare from Magician's Force, very low pop, PSA 10, 13 cards out of 103. Rarity index score of 12.6%. Getting down there, folks, in difficulty. This is a tough card to get in a PSA 10. And it's a secret rare, which is interesting. A lot of the stuff we've looked at recently have been ultra rares. It is kind of interesting to compare, right, how some of these ultras are still up there, really hard to get in PSA 10, even relative to secret rare stuff that's presumably smaller volume out there in the wild. Even some of these ultras, and you're going to see supers, are very difficult to grade PSA 10. All right, next up, number 5, we have Breaker, the Magical Warrior, first edition from Magician's Force, another MFC card, probably due in part to the shorter print run for MFC. There are 10 PSA 10s available in the world out of an 88 sample, right? 88 total pop. That's an 11.4% rarity index score here. We're getting down now into like the nosebleed territory, stuff that's, I mean, you want this stuff in 10, good luck, right? Okay, here it is, folks. The Luster Dragon misprint, Luster Dragon number 2 from LOD. It is believed that all of these cards were misprinted. They were supposed to say number 2 on them, but they don't in LOD. There has not yet been discovered, I believe, in LOD first edition Luster Dragon number 2 that has the number 2 printed on it. But as you can see here, folks, I mean, PSA 10 pop, 8 out of 72, folks. 11.1% rarity index score. We're starting to get down into territory that is, I mean, honestly dramatic frankly, in my opinion, compared to what you're, I mean, think about some of the baseline stuff we looked at, like the Blue Eyes White Dragon, the Left Foot, right? The Charizards. When we looked at some of those other things, I mean, especially with some of these cards, folks, like those 72 that people submitted for this are the best of the best. People aren't submitting the junk to PSA for a super rare like this. They're submitting the best and the nicest and the best centered stuff that they have to try and get a good grade out of it. When you think about the Charizards and the LOB Blue Eyes, people are submitting all kinds of junk, right? Like chewed up, been through the wash, garbage, trash to PSA because they think it's worth money. For this little guy here, the only stuff that's getting submitted probably by most collectors looks pretty good. And it's still 11.1%. And this is a super, right? This is not even an ultra or a secret, okay? We're getting down now into like, I don't know, in my opinion, like the Lotus territory of Yu-Gi-Oh, okay? This stuff has true rarity. True rarity. When there are 8 copies of something on Earth and you can't grade anything, like any of these, I challenge you, go ahead and do a box break, right? Buy up 2 or 3 boxes of Legacy of Darkness and try to pull this card and grade a 10. Good luck. These things are notoriously, infamously off-center. So look, I'll get off the soapbox here. It's a card that we're going to get into a couple of others that are even more difficult, but we're getting down now into the territory of stuff that is, I mean, in my opinion, like, I don't know. This is one of those cards that's like, in my opinion, one of the most difficult to get in a PSA 10 in the world. All right, here he is. The Paladin of White Dragon, Magician's Force, ultra rare, PSA 10 pop of 10 out of 93. Just north of 10% of these cards score a PSA 10. I mean, wow, right? I mean, just wow is all I can say. Like, again, it goes back to the point I mentioned for the Luster Dragon. The 93 copies of this thing that have been submitted are not trash. The first 93 that go into PSA are the best and brightest, the cleanest, the best centered, the nicest surfacing, the best edges, the best, right? The people that break the boxes, first thing they do is they send this stuff out to PSA. So it says a lot to me if only 10% of this stuff grades PSA 10, right? Because this is not the kind of thing where people send their junky ones to PSA. They're sending their best. That's all. And it's dramatic to me when I see a 10% rarity index score for a card like this. So, okay, we just walked through a couple of cards, folks, that are infamously difficult to grade as a PSA 10. Now, you may ask yourself, is it possible that there are Yu-Gi-Oh cards that have a less than 10% rarity index score, where less than 10% of the total pop grades a PSA 10? The answer is yes. And the first of these cards is the infamous, the coveted Injection Fairy Lily from LOD. Not a shocker here probably to a lot of folks. I mean, this is the card that like everybody knows intuitively is really, really hard to get in a PSA 10. Infamous centering issues with this card. A lot of them were played as well by kids, so a lot of them got damaged. So there is a huge pop here, 323, which I think is actually one of the larger, it's on the larger end of things, right? If you think back to our Blue Eyes and the Dark Magician Girl, those were both a little bit north of 400 submissions, I believe. This is now 323 for the Fairy Lily, so it's getting up there in the pop value, with 32 of them available in PSA 10. So relative to our friends over there, the Paladin of White Dragon and the Luster Dragon #2, there's a lot more of these lilies out there than those guys, but still, nonetheless, a very low rarity index score, largely driven by, in my opinion, the resubmitters, the people that have a PSA 9, and they're just like, I would wager that there are people out there who have 9 copies of this, the PSA 9, who have been resubmitting it for the past several years. Why not, right? Like if you have a PSA 9 of this and it looks possible that it could swing a 10, why wouldn't you every 6 months or every 8 months when you get it back, just keep cracking it out, keep resubmitting it, try and get a 10. Doesn't really cost that much. It's $8 to $10 if you do a big volume submission. May as well, it's worth a try, right? Just keep regrading it until you get a 10. I think that's what's going on here with the injection fairy lilies. I don't think there's 323 independent copies of this thing that people are grading. I think it's more like, I don't know. I mean, it could even be half of that. It could be 150 or 180 of these things that people just keep regrading over and over and over. And now, for the rarest PSA 10 card in all of Yu-Gi-Oh! This card that you're about to see is the most difficult to grade in a PSA 10. It is the most difficult to find in a PSA 10 on the open marketplace. And it is more valuable to some collectors than the LOB First Edition Blue Eyes or even the Left Foot. And that card, folks, is the Tyrant Dragon First Edition from Legacy of Darkness. This is an ultra rare card, folks. I mean, look at that stat. 7 10s out of 73 that have been submitted. And again, guys, those 73 that have been submitted are the best and the brightest copies of this card. People are not sending trash in those 73. They are sending the nicest, pack-fresh versions of this card. And even then, only 7 of them get a PSA 10, folks. If you want to buy this card in a PSA 10, good luck. This thing, wow, folks. I mean, 9.6% for something that doesn't even have that big of a pop, total pop, right? I'm very impressed when I look at these stats. And I'm also a little surprised. I kind of expected like the Fairy Lily or maybe the Dark Magician Girl to come out on top of this analysis, but it did not. So I don't know, folks. I mean, take it for what it's worth. This is a really tough card to grade a PSA 10. Maybe there's some more of these out there in the wild that will build this pop up a little bit, but I believe this one is also infamous for bad centering and production issues, so very hard card to grade or find or buy in a PSA 10. Not a lot of them out there. All right, just a couple of quick honorable mentions here because I know some people are going to be sad that these cards didn't get profiled. So obviously the enemy controller, which with a pop of 4, folks. PSA 10 pop of 4, right? That's like Mickey Mantle level right there for the PSA 10s. Very low pop, but again, it's Ancient Sanctuary. Nobody grades Ancient Sanctuary relative to Metal Raiders or LOB or the original sets. This was the last of the OG era, so just in general, very low pops for these ones. Chaos Emperor Dragon, got to give that one a quick shout out here. It tied for 13th place. 52 10s out of 299 submissions. So kind of interesting, right? I think it was the only one actually from Invasion of Chaos. I don't remember seeing a ton of those others in the Dirty Dozen that we profiled. So I don't know, kind of interesting. It is hard to get in PSA 10, and it is a secret rare for what it's worth. And of course, this little guy, right, had to get some airtime here. This was number 14 actually in the ranking here for the index. 17.5% rarity index score, 41 10s out of 234 total pops. So very tough card here to get in a PSA 10 as well. Not as tough though as our Dirty Dozen that we profiled here in today's video. So that is all, folks. I appreciate your time here. Please, 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 this video took a long time to put together. There was a lot of analysis that I had to do. And it was just very time consuming and painstaking to pull the data from PSA to get it into this presentation in a format that would be relatively easy to consume for everyone. So please, if you would, drop a like, comment, subscribe. I do plan to do more original content like this. I can guarantee you've never seen anything quite like this on YouTube before for Yu-Gi-Oh! Maybe you've seen baseball people do this or you've seen Pokemon people do this, but I've never seen this for Yu-Gi-Oh! Before. In my collection journey. Appreciate your time as always, folks. I would like to hear some conversation in the comments about what folks think about this analysis. What do you think of these results? What surprised you? All that sort of good stuff. Feel free to let me know. So thanks for watching. Once again, Parkside Merchant. We'll see you next time.